Good morning and welcome to our webinar on renewable hydrogen infrastructure. My name is Simbiat Youssef, Member Relations Manager here at Fourth, and I will be handing over moderating duties to my colleague and our Senior Director of Policy, Jeanette Shaw. Attendees, we ask that you please ask all your questions through the attendee chat, share them during the presentations, and we'll get to them at the end of our presentation today. And we will also be sharing the presentation slides and the recording of this presentation shortly after our webinar today. So if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with any of our speakers, we will include that information in the recap email. Fourth is a nonprofit trade association advocating for smart transportation. We are working through innovation, demonstration projects, advocacy, and engagement, consumer engagement to advance smart transportation. We're based in Portland, Oregon, but our work is international. We have over 190 members. If you have any questions or want to learn more about Fourth, our membership events, you can find that at our website at fourthmobility.org. And we have extended the deadline to join the Fourth team. We're still seeking qualified candidates for our Senior Manager of Strategic Communications and Partnerships. Applications are now open through September 9th at 5 p.m. If you're interested in submitting an application, please do so, and we will include information on that on the recap email. And the National E-Mobility Equity Conference, which will now take place on November 12th through the 13th, will explore and facilitate real conversations to work together in new ways, build new capabilities, and engage in new ways to thinking programs and policies for all. If you would like to learn more about this conference, you can find information at our website. We will also include this in our webinar recap. And the registration and sponsorship opportunities are now open for the annual Roadmap Conference. We're hoping in 2021, June 29th through 30th is the date. So please reserve that on your calendar. And if you would like to learn more information, we will include that. And to introduce our moderator today is Jeanette Shaw. Jeanette serves as Fourth's Senior Director of Policy and develops transportation electrification and e-mobility legislative and regulatory policies. Jeanette holds an executive MBA from Stanford University and a Bachelor of Science from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Jeanette?
Terrific. Thank you very much, Cindy. I appreciate that. And can you remind me too, the e-mobility conference, that's going to be held virtually or will that be in person?
That will be a virtual conference.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be honored and, well, very honored, but also excited to be part of such a wonderful panel of luminaries. As Simbiat mentioned, my name is Jeanette Shaw. I'm the Senior Director of Policy at Fourth. And I'm going to be introducing our speakers in which they will be speaking. So we'll start with Ken, who is our co-host. I'll then move to Jaimie, and then I will then introduce Amy and Evan. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. Ken Dragoon is the Executive Director at the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance, also known as ARCH-AA. Ken was an inspiration for RHA and provides management services through his consulting firm called Flink Engineering Consulting. Ken has 35 years of experience in the electric power industry, just a small amount, focusing on the interactions between variable renewable resources and the electric grid. He began his career in hydropower planning and modeling and transitioned to managing other renewable resources. Ken previously worked for Ecofis, Northwest Power, the Conservation Council, Renewable Northwest, Pacific Corp, Bonneville Power Administration, and Schlumberger Well Services. He authored Valuing Wind Generation on Integrated Power Systems and holds an MS in physics from the University of New Hampshire. And one fun fact about Ken lived in a commune in the Columbia River Gorge for 2 years, along with goats, sheep, chickens, turkeys, and horses before heading off to college. I can't say I've ever lived with chickens, Ken, but that we'll have to take it offline and talk about that one. Next speaker will be Jaimie. Jaimie is a Senior Program Manager and Director of West Coast Office Center for Transportation and the Environment. Jaimie is responsible for business development, project management oversight, and he interacts with federal, state legislators, and public officials regularly, advocating on behalf of zero-emission transportation technologies. Prior to joining CTE, Jaimie was the Director of Environmental Technology at AC Transit, where he was responsible for the Bay Area's fuel cell electric bus demonstration program, otherwise known as ZEBA, Zero Emission Bay Area, where he raised over $88 million in grants to support this program. Jaimie has more than 26 years of experience working for large public transit agencies and 20 years of experience developing and managing the fuel cell electric bus infrastructure projects. One fun fact about Jaimie, he lives in California. He's worked at Mount Hood Ski Patrol in Oregon, and as he says, he will forever be an Oregonian at heart. Feel free, Jaimie, anytime to come, we'll take you. Our next speaker will be Amy Ryan, who is Senior Engineer in the Fuel Cell Development Department of Toyota Motor Co., North America Research and Development. Amy is a Senior Engineer in the Fuel Cell Development Department of Toyota Research and Development, specializing in high-pressure hydrogen systems and associated standards and regulations for both light and heavy-duty applications. Amy joined the R&D department from Toyota's Sales and Marketing Business Unit, where she held several roles in product and strategic planning. Prior to Toyota, Amy was a senior consultant at KPMG, LLP, and a test engineer for TRW, which is now known as Northrop Grumman Space Technologies, and that was located in Redondo Beach, California. Amy received a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from UCLA and an MBA in Marketing Strategy from the University of California. A fun fact about Amy once ate garlic for 2 days straight to fight off a serious infection in remote Kyrgyzstan. And Amy, I'm allergic to garlic, so I can't even imagine what that would have been like. And then our last speaker of today's panel will be Evan Ramsey, Senior Director of Bonneville Energy Foundation Renewables. Evan is a specialist in renewable energy systems and leads the project development and management activities for the Renewable Energy Group. They advance renewables in the Northwest with innovative and creative solutions. Evan has managed hundreds of small renewable projects and over 10 megawatts large commercial projects. The clients that Evan has helped transition to renewable energy include Walmart, Safeway, Bayer, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, many local governments, and several universities. Evan is an accredited solar installation professional certified by the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Nature and Culture from the University of California at Davis. In addition to his schooling at UC Davis, he has studied abroad in Chile, completed a Himalayan ecological field study, and spent many years leading the backcountry of Kings Canyon National Park. One fun fact about Evan, Evan's first job in energy was actually installing solar panels on homes. So again, I'm honored to be part of this esteemed panel. And with that, I will turn it over to my co-host, Ken, for an overview of renewable hydrogen, and then we'll have the speakers give their perspective. Take it on, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks to Forth for hosting this. Thanks to Toyota, especially for supporting it. Toyota is a member of my organization, and they've been a really great partner. So before we turn it over to the experts, I just wanted to sort of set the table a little bit. You know, big question you may be thinking is why hydrogen? Why are we talking about hydrogen? And that's kind of the question I want to address in the next just a couple of minutes here. Hydrogen from renewable electricity. First, a word about my organization. We are the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. We're a trade association whose mission is to promote using renewable electricity to produce climate neutral fuels, to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. It's a mouthful, but using renewable electricity to make clean fuels. We have 67, 68 members now. It's a growing membership and very diverse group of folks interested in this particular mission, both electric and gas utilities, electrolyzer manufacturers, hydrogen transportation manufacturers, including fuel cell manufacturers and advocates for hydrogen vehicles, energy project developers, law firms, consultants, clean energy advocacy organizations, and others. Our newest member is the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. We welcome them heartily. It's an indication of the diversity of this topic, and you might be wondering why. Our organization is just 2 years old, but it's grown enormously and very, very quickly, and you might be wondering why. You may know that hydrogen today is almost entirely derived from natural gas and leaves a big carbon footprint, but there is another pathway, and that pathway is by passing an electric current through water, splits H2O into H2 and O. It's technology that's been around for 2 centuries, more than 2 centuries actually. There is the process that I just described is called alkaline. The water is treated a little bit to make it basic. There's another technology out there that's gaining traction today, and we think it will probably exceed alkaline technology in efficiency and cost soon. But its main point here is this isn't anything that's particularly new or novel or difficult or not commercial. In fact, the alkaline electrolyzer technology has been employed at utility scale since the 1920s. So why now? There's really been a revolution that's occurred, and that is in wind and solar costs have gone down. We now have a very low cost, low carbon source of electricity. Really didn't make sense to use electricity to make hydrogen if that electricity had its own footprint, carbon footprint. But we have 2 things going on right now. One is that the increasing dependence on variable renewable resources, wind and solar, is causing very large surpluses in the wholesale market, which is the lower left graph. You can see negative prices in California due to the solar in the middle of the day and in the spring. And using those surpluses to make hydrogen, which is going on in Europe at scale, has caused economies of scale so that the technology itself has dropped in cost enormously. These 2 things are expected to continue as we depend more on renewable electricity for our sources of electricity in total. So that's the message I want to leave you with, is that if we're going to depend largely on renewable electricity, we're going to have these big surpluses, and we either throw it away or we use it to make hydrogen, and that's why we're talking about hydrogen so much today. And with that, I will turn it over to the real experts who can talk to you about hydrogen transportation.
Thank you, Ken. And why don't we go ahead and turn it over to Jaimie for his presentation.
Hey, thanks, Jeanette, and thanks, Forth, for this opportunity to talk about a subject I'm very passionate about. Of course, without demand, there isn't then the draw of supply. And so what I want to do is focus on how fuel cells, which require hydrogen to operate, how they are playing out in the marketplace. So first, a little bit about CT. We're a 501c3, a nonprofit with a focus on zero-emission transportation technologies. Our portfolio over the 27 years that we've been in operation exceeds $600 million. Today, we're presently working on 90 projects with a total capital value of $316 million. And we have offices, our main office is in Atlanta, but I'm here in Berkeley, suffering from terrible smoke problems from all the forest fires driven by climate change, I'm sure everyone's been reading about. And we also have offices in LA and St. Paul. Our 4 focus areas of our organization are prototype development, a smart deployment of larger fleets, helping fleets make transition towards zero emission, and education and outreach. You can see by this map the extent of our projects across the United States. Most of these are battery electric, but as you'll see later in my presentation, it's evolving with fuel cells as the realization that fuel cells have a much more adaptable flexible capability. So CT is involved in a number of fuel cell and hydrogen projects for various vehicle types, upgrading Class 6 UPS delivery trucks to fuel cells, demonstrating Class 8 drayage trucks, working on heavy-duty marine cargo top loaders, and as mentioned in my introduction, working on the transition of 40 and 60-foot transit buses to zero emission, and then developing heavy-duty and light-duty hydrogen fueling stations that are going to require renewable hydrogen sources. I like to make the point that fuel cells are operationally efficient because they address range, passenger payload is increased with fuel cells, and they can handle multiple duty cycles because they can fuel quickly. But we have two key objectives in achieving this operational efficiency. That's making the CapEx affordable and the OpEx affordable, which is driving the price of hydrogen and fuel supplies down, which is one of our biggest challenges. As I previously alluded to, these are the four key fuel cell advantages: proven range. Here in this case, we're talking about transit buses, 300 plus miles, but we're also looking at trucks, heavy duty trucks at range of 500 miles or more. Reduction in vehicle weight to carry not just more passengers, but also freight. Rapid refueling periods that allow you a one-to-one replacement of conventional vehicles and operating within the same fleet fueling parameters. And the challenge, though, is with battery electric, it's much cheaper and easier to start out, but scalability drives the costs up with respect to providing grid power, whereas fuel cell buses, the infrastructure actually is much less as you scale up to larger fleets. But there are challenges, and I'm not going to go through all these various challenges in detail, but these have to be addressed if we're going to really achieve a hydrogen economy in the transportation sector. And ultimately, under R, there are several factors: renewables, resiliency, and redundancy. But we ultimately have to have 100% renewable fuel if we're going to achieve our goals of greenhouse gas reductions, which, given the environment here, I'm looking out my window and it's smoky and brown and from the fires, we really have to do significant work to go towards a renewable future, which will eliminate greenhouse gases. That transition from battery electric to fuel cell electric is really being recognized by transit agencies who wrote letters, 18 agencies here in California, to the California Energy Commission, saying we need hydrogen as part of our transition plan to zero emission. So many are now featuring both fuel cell and battery electric, and recognition that it's going to take fuel cell transportation in order to do that. It's being driven by regulation. Here you have the ICT, Innovative Clean Transit Regulation, which will require 25% of new purchases on transit by 2023, and ultimately achieving a full zero emission fleets of over 10,000 buses by 2040. On the Advanced Clean Truck Regulation, which was recently adopted, we're looking at having to, beginning in 2024, you can see these percentage of sales that have to be achieved with zero emission and growing to significant numbers by 2035. So the demand is going up. And here's just on Friday, an example of the progress that's being made. The California Energy Commission launched their development of light duty stations. And just last Friday, they announced $115 million that will be awarded to build 123 light duty stations, with 180 because we're expecting 60 to come online within the next year. There are over 50 now. So by 2025, 180 light duty stations. 33% by state law have to use renewable fuel. But in the case of project we worked on with Shell, which received an award to build over 50 light duty fueling stations, they are looking at their target of 100% renewable supplies from solar, wind, and biogas to achieve the goals of greenhouse gas reduction. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that our organization, as part of our education outreach, is hosting a zero emission bus virtual conference on September 15th through the 17th. You can register for that going to ZEB for Zeb Conference, zebconference.com. Today, we all have over 800 people registered for that conference. Thank you very much, and look forward to addressing your questions and in the panel discussion.
Thank you, Jaimie. I appreciate your use of the acronyms as well as an overview of the pilots. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy, who is with Toyota, who will review some specific projects.
Thanks, Jeanette. I am going to be sharing my screen now. And can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I will go into the slideshow mode. So thanks, Jeanette, and good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Ryan, and I'm a senior engineer at Toyota Motor North America R&D. Today, I'd like to share with you our vision of a hydrogen-fueled future and why hydrogen is uniquely suited for many diverse applications. And to top it off, I'm going to share with you something that we're all really excited about here at R&D. 5 years ago, we announced the Toyota Environmental Challenge 2050. It's our roadmap to a world where people, cars, and nature can coexist in harmony. Through it, we're working to reduce the environmental impact from cars to as close to zero as possible, while developing ways to create a sustainable society on planet Earth. Toyota's first pledge is to reduce the global average CO2 emissions from our new fleet vehicles by 90% compared to our global 2010 levels. Toyota is committed to ensuring that the air we breathe is not only clean, but that our planet can recover from the effects of climate change. We believe so strongly in our critical role in addressing this problem that we've pulled ahead our vehicle electrification targets by 5 years. And Toyota's portfolio approach means that it will continue to offer a variety of zero-emission vehicles. Toyota started developing fuel cell vehicles in the early 90s at about the same time as development started on the Prius. Over the course of 20 years, Toyota has produced many fuel cell vehicle prototypes, including the Toyota Highlander in the 2000s. Around 2010, Toyota decided to make a mass production fuel cell vehicle for lease and for sale, a world's first. The Mirai launched in 2010 and is now the world's most popular fuel cell vehicle by a wide margin. The Mirai was Toyota's first purpose-built fuel cell vehicle. In just 5 years, it evolved from an expensive prototype to an affordable production vehicle. This was made possible with component sharing across Toyota's hybrid lineup. The Mirai has now reached a milestone of 10,000 units, with 3,000 units produced annually. But what about the fuel? It's not well known that hydrogen has been an industrial commodity for decades, and the U.S. produces 10 million tons of hydrogen per year. Most hydrogen is used for oil refining and for making fertilizer. So this large-scale industry of production exists. The challenges are getting it into our customers' vehicles and increasing renewable generation. Our Mirai customers tell us that they value consistency and familiarity. And for them, the refueling experience mirrors that of a gasoline vehicle. It's simple and consistent across stations. With a quick fill occurring in less than 5 minutes, while providing over 300 miles of range, our customers won't have to rearrange their day to be on their way. And furthermore, it doesn't eliminate those in city centers or without access to at-home charging. In California, Toyota coordinates with the many station providers that make up our current network of 41 retail stations. While early stations had one nozzle and were undersized, the stations coming online now will meet the demands of the growing market with 4 times the capacity and multiple fueling positions. This high output is good for our customers' wallets and for their peace of mind. The future of hydrogen infrastructure is bright. 24 new stations have been funded with additional grant money allocated for a next wave of stations. With a projected 200 stations by 2025 and 1,000 stations in 2030 in California alone, the chicken and egg argument can finally be put to rest. In addition, 5 Northeast states will be receiving stations in the near future. But no conversation about increased hydrogen production would be complete without recognizing the influence of heavy duty on the light duty market. And in fact, the two are synergistic. Large hydrogen vehicles have about 40 times the fuel consumption of a typical Mirai, and their greater fuel demand drives down the cost of fuel for both classes of vehicles alike. To that end, Toyota is currently building 10 Class 8 trucks in coordination with PACCAR after already accumulating thousands of on-road miles. With an 80,000-pound gross vehicle weight rating, 300 miles of range, and 560 horsepower, this truck means business. The trucks are currently in an evaluation period throughout 2020. And to feed these beasts, 2 new heavy-duty stations help complete a 5-station network in the LA basin. 3 stations will be built in coordination with Shell with over 1 ton capacity per day. And 2 existing stations were built with Air Liquide, creating a necessary redundancy around the ports. Fuel cells are well suited to larger and long-range vehicles like the Mirai, as seen in this plot. Fuel cell strengths include a 5-minute refueling time, longer range, and great cold weather performance. The technology enables better scalability and cargo capacity since energy storage is separated from energy production. That means that large and often heavy batteries are not necessary to increase range, only adding lighter and larger tanks while keeping the fuel size constant. At this time, Toyota has multiple projects around the world, both immobile and mobile, demonstrating the modularity of the fuel cell technology. Beyond the Mirai, projects include forklifts, buses, ships, stationary power, and delivery trucks. In Paris, London, and California, Mirai is being used successfully in fleets because it enjoys a high uptime, resulting in fewer vehicles needed, low operating costs, and a long warranty for trouble-free service, long range and quick refueling time, and access to emissions-limited city areas such as Paris and London and others. The Mirai has also demonstrated backup power capabilities using a CHAdeMO connection and Honda inverter. Last year, 4 Mirai powered the electrical equipment at a U2 concert in Japan. And here in SoCal, 2 Mirai have been used to supply up to 18 kilowatts of quiet power to support healthcare workers at a COVID test site. And now for something special, the next generation 2021 Mirai. We wanted to dispel the notion that eco-friendly cars are uncool or incapable of fully replacing a gasoline engine. An all-new premium rear-wheel drive platform makes the Mirai larger, wider, and more aerodynamic than its predecessor. A strong focus was made on outstanding driving characteristics. With a low center of gravity and optimized handling, this sporty and elegant-looking Mirai takes on corners like no other Toyota. The interior is modern, not only in styling, but in available technology, with an immersive multimedia touchscreen and 14-speaker JBL system. With extensive repackaging, we also added a rear middle seat, making the Mirai a true 5-seater sedan. While I can't share too many other details, I can highlight maybe the most important new feature. Thanks to fuel cell improvements and a larger hydrogen storage system, the range is targeted to increase by more than 30% over the current model. Our goal was to make a car that customers want for design and driving performance that just so happens to be a fuel cell vehicle. And that's what we believe we've achieved in the 2021 Mirai, available at the end of this year. So in more ways than one, the new Mirai is a significant evolution of technology and an important preview of what's to come in Toyota's lineup. Today I've explained how Toyota is expanding its fuel cell portfolio by powering mobility solutions of all sizes. And with improvements in fuel cell technology and increased hydrogen production, Toyota will increase its global impact to a zero-emission world together. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. That Mirai is beautiful, as you've said. So thank you for allowing us to do that. It is. And also to go over the ZEV-10 Class 8 trucks that you're working on with PACCAR. That's exciting news. So thank you very much for that presentation. And going to go ahead and turn it over to Evan. Please go for it.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jeanette, and thanks to Forth for this opportunity to talk about this real interesting topic with all of you. And it's an honor to be on this panel with the other panelists. So I'm Evan Ramsey. I am the director of our renewables program here at the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. Our group's goal has been to break down barriers to renewable energy adoption. And we've focused on a number of technologies over the years, and renewable hydrogen has been a major focus over the past several years. We are a very unique 501c3 nonprofit in that we don't spend a large amount of our time doing advocacy or getting involved in policy. We like to focus on projects. And so that's been our main focus as it pertains to renewable hydrogen, is how can we get projects developed that can show and demonstrate the value that this technology holds. So this is a busy graphic, but it's one from the U.S. Department of Energy. And what it really does here, I think, is that it shows how hydrogen production from electricity can really be this medium and couple a clean electrical grid to many of these other different sectors that may be hard to decarbonize or hard to directly electrify. And, I wanted to highlight that hydrogen isn't really, one solution for one problem. It's not just applicable to the transportation sector. As others mentioned, it can be used for ammonia production, for fertilizer. It can be used in the natural gas system for space heating or industrial heat. It can be used to refine metals and so on, and many other industrial processes. But I've circled here in this graphic the main areas of focus for BEF, and that is on the production side. You know, how do we use the electrical grid and how do we generate this renewable hydrogen from electricity? But then also, how do we figure out how to develop the markets for natural gas injection for vehicles and then for ammonia there, which is NH3. And what we've started doing is we started looking at, you know, well, what is the current, you know, set of market conditions that we're working with, and what are the costs that we can produce this hydrogen at, and where are the nearest term, you know, business opportunities for someone who wants to generate hydrogen and then utilize it. And so we commissioned, you know, some market analyses, and we had a cost model developed. So now we're able to, you know, figure out, well, what is the levelized cost of hydrogen production given various inputs of electricity price and utilization rates and so on. And, you know, a lot of folks are talking about the transportation sector, and that is one of the best near-term business cases for renewable hydrogen because of, you know, the relative market size of transportation fuels and how much we use as a society. But then also some policies that are in place, like low carbon fuel standards, and also the relatively high cost of gas and diesel relative to the other natural gas end uses that hydrogen could supplant. And so talking about hydrogen costs here, we're looking at, you know, if you had about a $3.50 per gallon of gasoline, you're at about an equivalent of an $8 per kilogram of hydrogen fuel. Obviously, gas prices have gone down lately, but you know, they do fluctuate over time. This is a graphic here from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which is showing projections for where the cost of renewably produced hydrogen will go over the coming decades. And, you know, out to 2050, they're showing that renewable hydrogen could be under $1 per kilogram. So, you know, much, much cheaper than existing gasoline prices, and completely renewable. And also, under $1 a kilogram would be under the current prices of fossil natural gas for the most part to make hydrogen. However, we have policies that are encouraging clean fuels and clean transportation, like the Oregon has a clean fuels program here where we're located in the Northwest. California has a low carbon fuel standard that operates very much the same way. And these programs provide substantial value for renewable fuels like hydrogen, and can really help make the business case, especially in these early days of market growth. And so using our tools that we developed and analyzing some you know, electricity supply, we just took an existing industrial electric tariff from one of our consumer-owned utility partners here in the Northwest. They're actually 100% hydropowered, so you know, 100% clean electricity applied to this electrolysis. And we found that, well, even at a low, relatively small plant size of about 5 megawatts there in the orange bar, we could produce renewable hydrogen for about $5.36 per kilogram. And so that's not quite at the $1 target yet, but you know, we're working under the existing regulatory environment for electricity supply. However, what the green bar represents is that if we sell that renewable hydrogen into a transportation sector in Oregon, for example, we could get $4.32 in clean fuels credits. And so the net cost of hydrogen production is already at $1 a kilogram, which you know, is pretty remarkable that today, with just this one policy in place, we can achieve these targets that some folks have, you know, been forecasting for 2050. So, you know, as Jaimie mentioned in his presentation, the demand side of this equation is really one of the bigger things we think we need to focus on, is growing the demand and the amount of end users of renewable hydrogen, because as we've found, the production of renewable hydrogen is not really the difficult part. It's do we have enough of a market pull to produce this fuel, this renewable fuel at scale? So globally, we've got, there's been a ton of activity lately. And so I wanted to touch on kind of this global movement before I get to some more local stuff. And there's also been a ton of policy development lately that we didn't really get to touch on here across our panelists. But, you know, Europe and Asia have a tremendous, you know, goals and tremendous volumes of renewable hydrogen they're planning to produce and use as part of their you know, green initiatives. But recently, Air Products announced with some other partners a project in Saudi Arabia that would be the world's largest green hydrogen plant, set to come online in the next 5 years. A $5 billion plant that would be able to fuel over 200,000 buses. Australia has been very highly prioritizing renewable hydrogen for export. They have great renewable resources in Australia, and they have about 5 gigawatts of planned renewable capacity that will produce renewable hydrogen for export to Asia, as well as connect, I think, via a transmission line to Singapore. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is a municipal utility that serves LA, and they've got a $1 billion project in Utah where they'll be storing vast amounts of hydrogen in underground salt cavern and then burning that in a combustion turbine to firm up some of their power supply and help integrate new renewables that are coming online there. And then off the North Sea, in Europe, you know, Shell has a 10 gigawatt plans for large amounts of offshore wind and hydrogen production over the next coming decades. Locally here, we're involved with several projects of various applications, and I can't share too many details about some of these, but we will be having some press releases here shortly over the coming weeks. But one that's been in the news is Douglas County Public Utility District in central Washington is in the midst of procuring a 5 megawatt electrolyzer that will be located near their hydro generator. And they're really finding a ton of value in this electrolyzer to provide operating reserves for the utility. Utilities that generate power have to hold some of their capacity in reserve, and having a flexible load can actually serve that purpose. So they can actually sell more of their hydropower simply by integrating a flexible electrolyzer into their operations. We're also involved in a larger scale electrolysis plant that would incorporate liquid hydrogen and be able to generate over 20 tons of renewable hydrogen a day, and that hydrogen could go into transportation markets or other markets here in the Northwest or into California. We also are expecting to announce the first hydrogen fueling station funding in the region here shortly, so that's very exciting. And then there is a project in the Northwest here that will be looking to inject hydrogen into the natural gas pipeline, and we hope to have an announcement out on that one here shortly as well. So lots of exciting stuff happening here locally and globally, and I'm excited to be able to share that with you. And so that should do it for me. Thanks for listening, and I guess we're getting into Q&A now.
Thank you very much, Evan. And I think I have Bonneville Environmental Foundation slide envy, the one with the circles. I may need to borrow that one. But thank you for highlighting the different projects that you have been involved in. It's so much more than I had anticipated, and likely some of our viewers have anticipated too. So I appreciate the overview. We have several Q&As teed up. So why don't I go ahead and I'll start with a few, and then we can go into the many more that are coming rapidly in on, probably more than we have time for. But perhaps we could start with one, Amy. We had a request from somebody who asked, what is the price tag of the Mirai? Are you at liberty to share?
The price tag of the new Mirai?
Correct.
Okay. We haven't set the pricing yet, but we think it'll be comparably, it'll be priced comparably to another vehicle with the similar high-tech features. So look out for an announcement, though.
Great. Thank you, Amy. And there was a couple that seemed to come in frequently, so I think we'll ask those, then we can get more into the meat. But one was, how safe is renewable hydrogen? And in particular during natural disasters. And some folks may be asking that because here in the Pacific Northwest, as Jaimie had alluded to, but those in Portland know we've been high winds and lots of smoke. But not sure who wants to take that on first, if Jaimie or Evan or Amy?
Yeah, I would just comment on safety. We've put on millions of miles using hydrogen, and that doesn't matter whether it's renewable or from non-renewable sources. But we have an excellent, hydrogen has an excellent record in terms of safety, and the design of these systems are such that when there is an incident, it's a very controlled incident. I've actually had that experience. I can tell you this: if we were going from a hydrogen economy to a petroleum fuel economy, we would be far more frightened about the consequences concerning the devil that we know now, that we're used to. In terms of resiliency, this is one of the real values of hydrogen. And as we move to zero emission, resiliency is really important. How can we maintain our systems when there are natural disasters that affect, for instance, the grid? And with hydrogen, we can have excess supplies and operate off the grid fully to be able to continue our operations. So I think hydrogen, bottom line, is very safe and is very resilient. That is an objective we have to meet.
And I'll just add one more thing. Hydrogen is energy storage, and most people think about energy storage as, let's take electricity out of the system and then let's put it back in. But hydrogen is a molecule just like our current fossil fuels, and when we produce it and then store it, that energy can be used for our transportation system in a grid outage, or it can be used in all these other end-use sectors. And so just by having a molecule, you're going to have a little bit more resilience than just batteries that might be reliant on a grid.
Perfect. Well, to follow up on that, and Evan, you had alluded to this in your presentation just about demand and production versus the difficult bringing it up to scale. So what are the factors regarding supply and demand? And as some have said, should charging stations come first? Should the cars come first? It's the chicken and the egg, or as our executive director calls it, the hot dog and the bun. We'd like each of you, if you would like to address that.
Yeah, I know Jaimie probably has some great thoughts on this as well, but I'll take a crack first. You really need some policies in place to kind of set the direction for all of the private sector players. You need it for the auto manufacturers. You need it for the investors that are going to invest in hydrogen fueling infrastructure or hydrogen production infrastructure. So, we need to know that there's a trajectory where people can focus their efforts and where, capital can get organized to help, develop the infrastructure. So that's first and foremost. But, and then you need, it's either funding or you need some plans for where that infrastructure is going to go. And so RHA, for example, is rolling out a renewable hydrogen action plan for the Northwest, where they're going to be engaging with energy sector leaders and policymakers to start thinking about this. We're pretty far behind in the Northwest where we're based. California has been working at this for a long time. Other regions around the globe have pretty strong plans. And so that's really step one, is education, awareness, and planning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then I would add to what Evan was saying, that you have to bring the two together. We're talking about major shifts in how we use energy, and so it's not like throwing a light switch. All of a sudden, here's the fuel supply, and here are the vehicles, and that's why companies like Toyota, other automotive OEMs, Hyundai, Honda, U.S. companies, European companies are working towards a combined solution. And so I mentioned this award of $115 million to build 123 more fueling stations to add to the, actually are 40 presently online, with another close to 20 that will be coming online within the next year or so. And that that is also sparked, and I'll defer to Amy on Toyota and the other automotive OEMs who are going to provide vehicle supply to match that the demand to match the supply. On the fleet side, there you have a ready demand with buses and trucks, and there's real value on the heavy duty side to also drive up volumes.
And I'll just add from the OEM side, we are getting more and more manufacturers are interested in fuel cell vehicles, and Toyota, as I've said, is dedicated to, and we believe in the fuel cell vehicle future for different applications. And I will say that in the groups in industry groups that I'm working in, every light vehicle manufacturer, more or less, is pursuing heavy duty, whether that's buses or large trucks at the same time. So we're committed, and I know many other automakers are as well.
Terrific. I would agree with that. Thank you. A couple other questions that relates to policy. And Evan, I know you mentioned that you don't directly work on policy. I know Jaimie does, and of course, Amy with Toyota, you do. But California has a cap and trade type system. But what policies do you think are needed outside of California, within the United States, to develop the infrastructure in order to be able to pay for that infrastructure? But is there policies that we should be looking at? Policies you recommend, or is that a broader topic you'd like to have another webinar on?
I'll try to give my best answer there. The one I mentioned in my slides was low carbon fuel standards. Has been a tremendously successful program in both California and Oregon. Washington's tried a few times to get legislation passed to that effect. So that one, works really well. Cap and trade has generated, hundreds of millions of dollars for clean transportation in California. So that's obviously been favorable for hydrogen and other technologies. We work with utilities a lot, and so there's a lot of opportunity for utilities to get involved and for policies that might affect them, such as renewable gas standards for natural gas utilities. Hydrogen can be blended into their system, and even at small percentages, it can mean many very large volumes of hydrogen. And then also in energy storage, mandates, which Oregon has some and California has some. Having hydrogen as a part of that can, essentially create that demand pull.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Jaimie.
I would just add that we need both. We need the carrot and the stick. And California has been very effective in that. And I think other states are starting to follow their example. But regulation always pushes. We may not be able to meet the target goals, but without having a finish line, a target, then there's no incentive to move industry in the direction that we desperately need. But incentives such as what we've achieved with cap and trade, the low carbon fuel standard credits that Evan mentioned. My colleague at the Fuel Cell Partnership, Keith Malone, mentioned that, in fact, if you have high capacity fueling capabilities, you then are required to meet a 40% renewable requirement. And the California Energy Commission and our legislature want 100% renewable. So we are moving in that direction, and costs will come down with volume. That is an absolute certainty.
Great, thank you. And we have so many more questions. And as mentioned, we will be getting out both the recording of this webinar, but also the questions, and we'll make sure we can get some answers to those. But there's one unique one I thought we could ask from Mike, which is, how much variability in the fuel price do you expect at the pump? Will it fluctuate with cost of renewables on a daily or weekly basis? And this will be our last question for our panelists.
Jaimie, do you want to take that one, or I can give it a shot?
Yeah. So I think presently hydrogen is very expensive, as as in terms of the production options that are available. But as I said before, I think volume will drive that price down. We're paying for fleet operation, which is transporting liquid fuel to these various heavy-duty applications, upwards of $8 a kilogram. That in transit is now is reflected in a price per mile of almost $1 or around $1 per mile. That's very high in cost, but I think Evan showed how the cost can come down significantly. And I would just remind people about what I said in my presentation, operational efficiency. We have to look at the total, the way we operate our vehicles in terms of range, in terms of consumer preference, the ease of fueling, the speed of fueling. There are a lot of factors that play in the cost. And I have no doubt that the cost of hydrogen at the pump is going to be comparable to our traditional fuels, and will provide, fuel cell vehicles will provide capabilities that battery electric vehicles cannot do in many circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Jaimie. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Symbiot, but also I shall likely say this, but I want to give a shout out to our host, the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance, and our supporter, Toyota. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Symbiot, to wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. And thank you to all of our presenters today. Fantastic job, Jeanette, and our speakers, Evan, Amy, Jaimie, and Ken. Thank you to our sponsor today, Toyota, and our webinar partner, Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. This has been a great and informative conversation that we've started today. Feel free to ask any additional questions. We'll be sending a webinar recap, and we will include the webinar recording as well as the slides for you all. And if you have any additional questions, we ask that you keep them coming, and we will continue the conversation via email. And we hope you're able to join us in 2 weeks on Tuesday, September 22nd for our next webinar in our fall series on smart charging and real-world applications. We will be joined by Greenbots and Siemens, and they will explore lessons learned from pilots, current trends, and more on managed smart charging. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to more conversations via email.
Great. Thank you, Jaimie, Evan, and Amy. Next time we'll need 90 minutes.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sure.